Morning. How are you this morning? It's Christo here on Talk TV. It's a Sunday morning. It's breakfast. I'm with you till 10. Lots we've got coming up between now and that time. Now, before we bring in Paul Britton, who is the leading criminal defence lawyer, you write leading, don't you? You make us say leading contractually, don't you?
No, I asked you to say top, but you seem to downgrade me to leading. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, as I said the other time,
you say I'm top.
You were wrong. Yeah, it's just difficult to get my head around you being top. Sunday Mirror this morning. Jamie, act now on free school meals. And front page story, I'm holding it up for you right now if you're listening along on DAB. Jamie, act now on free school meals. Jamie Oliver. Now, of course, school meals has been one of his big campaigns over the years, and he had a whole TV show about Jamie's school meals where he tried to ban the turkey Twizzler. Do you remember that a few years ago? Well, he's joined calls for the government to give struggling children free school meals all year round. So not just during school time, but actually during the school holidays as well. The TV celebrity chef hit out at a shocking Trussell Trust survey which revealed a quarter of teenagers know someone who skips meals. He said free school meals can't just be limited to term time if we truly want to help people. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call for you to tell me whose responsibility is it to feed our children. And is this one of those instances where we may have an ideological view on whether it's a parent's responsibility to feed their children? However, is this an occasion where there are many things that the state have to pick up the slack on? For instance, I'll use myself as an example. You know, I am considered overweight, right? And there might be a lot of people that might say, well, you know what? You don't deserve the state to pick up your NHS treatment. There are people who are smokers. There are people who are drinkers. There are people who go rock climbing. I'm not one of the people that goes rock climbing, in case you were unaware of that. And what happens is that the choices that they have made means that, unfortunately, if something goes wrong, as we are a society, the state picks up the slack. So therefore, if I have a health problem as a result of being overweight, if I was rock climbing and I fell off the cliff and hurt myself, if we see it every weekend, if I drink to the point where I fall over and I need medical care, well, I don't drink every weekend till I fall over and say, well, you see it on the streets. I should be careful of saying that. But you get the point I'm making, that sometimes there are choices that people make that we don't like, and in an ideal world, those choices wouldn't be made, and the state has to step in and say, well, actually, we're going to pick up the slack because that's what being in a society is all about. So if you're asking me, it's a parent's responsibility to make sure their children are fed. But clearly, it's not happening. So is it one of those occasions where your head has to say, well, look, it's down to the parents, but your heart has to say, well, unfortunately, as a society, sometimes the state does need to step in because the parents aren't doing what they should be doing. I remember one of my earliest memories is how poor my parents were. And this isn't me getting out the smallest violin. It's absolutely true. Before my dad started his own business in the 80s, my parents were dirt poor. I mean, so poor that they used to share a meal. And they used to say they weren't hungry, but the reason was because they were feeding me and my brother. I never went to school hungry. I never went to school without an absolutely pristinely clean, ironed school uniform. I never went without anything because their priorities were myself and my brother. Their priorities were also not to have more children so that they could give myself and my brother a better life. And their priorities were to then work as hard as possible to get themselves out of that poverty and live a comfortable life. So, on paper, that's my view. On paper, what does it cost to send your child to school with a piece of toast and a pat lunch? But that doesn't happen. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. And the problem is that as much as you argue that children shouldn't get free school meals, which is where ideologically I stand, it's the children who are suffering. So it's a really difficult one. and I want to know where you stand on 0344 499 1000. Paul.
Where do I stand? Do you know, you hit so many nails on the head there. So when I was 2 years old, we had vegetable crates as furniture. But just as you said, I never went to school through my entire life without food. My parents cut back, and I think that maybe this isn't so much a case of should taxpayers be paying for children's school meals, as opposed to turning our attention to these parents and saying, what are your cost priorities? Are they going on holiday? Are they buying the latest iPhone every September? Or are they actually genuinely struggling? You know, who are these parents? What are their priorities?
And are they, again, because I hate being torn on this, because I've been on TV and argued this and had people saying, well, you want children in poverty. Of course I don't want children in poverty.
Not, no.
What I want, and it's
but Christo, we were probably in poverty as children.
Yeah, I would absolutely.
But unbeknownst, maybe our parents were the ones in poverty.
Yeah.
But our parents these days, not prepared for themselves to live in poverty, and argue that their children are living in poverty. Are they prioritising their own needs above their children?
It's a similar principle to the child benefit cap staying at 2 children and the big debate about that, and Keir Starmer in the last few weeks saying that he would keep the child benefit cap at 2 children. He wouldn't increase it. And again, on paper, I'm absolutely in favour of that, because I want a society where parents or prospective parents do what my parents did, what a lot of the parents do that I know, who say, well, we can only really afford 2 children, so we're only going to have 2 children, and beyond that, that's where the state's responsibility
That's right. I mean,
ends.
there's solicitors who I work with now who have...
You're all on millions.
Well, that's what people think, who have 1 child, and I say, are you going to have another one? And they say to me, they're too expensive.
Yeah.
But we are going to have a problem in this country with population. When the ageing population start to disappear, we are not going to have enough youngsters. The baby boom days are over.
But I'm not against state help. Where I feel that we get it wrong in this country is that the debate is about child benefit, or the debate is about free school meals. For me, what we should be providing as a state is much more comprehensive and subsidised childcare, things like that. So therefore, what happens is that parents can then work more easily, and then therefore they can go up the career ladder and they can get themselves out of poverty.
And pay tax, which goes back into the system, which pays for their childcare and school meals.
Taking the poorest people out of tax altogether by raising the tax threshold at that end of society. So that kind of help is what I think the state should be providing, rather than you can't afford to feed your children, here's the free school meals.
Taking people out of tax altogether, I'm not so in favour of that, because
Why?
I think that everybody should contribute to the system. Maybe a lower level of tax, but everybody should pay in, because they should take ownership of that system.
I think
if
that
you don't pay tax,
earning,
you can say, well, it's not. I don't pay any tax.
Yeah, but under £15,000, if you're, I don't think you should. I mean, I think it's 12,500 or so that's the threshold now when you start paying. I would raise that. I would absolutely raise that. I think that, especially even now during the cost of living crisis, if you're earning 15,000 or under, you shouldn't be paying. I don't think you should be paying tax.
No. Well, I believe that everybody should pay tax, maybe a lower bracket.
You still pay council tax, you still pay VAT, you are still paying. The government would still get their fair share. I get what you're saying, you're not handing over money every month, but that you are still being taxed. But income tax, I would take people out of. That's where I would help in order to make sure that children... And I think you raised a very good point, though, about education as well, about... has our education system failed, that parents whose priorities seem to be, some parents, not all, but some parents whose priorities seem to be skewed?
So my father started his business in the 90s, yours in the 80s, and he passed on those skills to me. I've started my own law firm. You're now a very successful TV.
Extremely
You're
successful.
The top TV presenter at Talk TV.
I won't
the only time you'll be
with
top anything in your life.
Won't argue with that. Steady. No, and I understand where you're coming from, and you just work. I mean, my whole point is
That's right,
just work
every day.
And okay, I don't go down a mine. I mean,
No.
I've got to be honest. You know, this is not like a.
But life has changed, and the jobs that we do have changed.
Yeah, and I just don't. I just. My mentality is also, and you always have something else on the side. And I've bought property, and I've done a lot of stuff to try and make
passive
sure
income,
that you're you're constantly going forward. At the moment, I want to. Again, this isn't about me, but I want to sell our house and take some money out, maybe do another place up to try and make some more money. I constantly want to move forward because that's exactly my dad's mentality, and my mum's, but my dad's more than anyone.
Well, it's what they talk about social mobility, isn't it? A lot of people complain that social mobility is at an all-time low. But when you look at the people that are they're not even on the ladder. They're not even trying to move up. And
that you have to... That so many decisions in life are business decisions, and having that mentality, and I'm extremely lucky, as are you, that we did have that example. But are we being unfair on those people who didn't have that example, who perhaps, it's very easy for us. And
so then how do we deliver that to them who are missing it?
Well, the education system should.
When I bought my first property, in the day of self-certifying, I would go to the supermarket after 6 o'clock to buy the yellow label discounted food because I had no money. And I had to pay my mortgage. That was my priority in life. I didn't go to Costa or Starbucks or a tea or a coffee. I bought tea bags in the biggest quantity that I could as cheaply as possible and had tea and coffee at home before I left for work.
Yeah, and also I remember that again, this is a slightly different era, but my first house I bought was in the worst area in Leeds. I mean, literally behind Yorkshire Television in a place called Burley. When I moved to London,
That's what you could afford.
Yeah. I had a council flat an ex-council flat, which was just off the Wandsworth Road, when no one wanted to live off the Wandsworth Road, I tell you. But whereas I feel like now...
That was step one on the ladder. Was
step one, and I always knew it was step one, and I was going to make it as nice as possible so that I could get to step two. And then step two was, I moved to Brixton, and within a few days, literally, I'm sorry to tell you this if you're eating your breakfast, close your ears, but someone left... someone went to the toilet on my doorstep.
Okay.
That was the kind of place. Now, I don't want people living in that, but what I'm saying is that I said to myself, I'm young, this is when I can live in places like this.
That's right.
And try and move up. And I wonder as well whether, because some young people now have the mentality that I'm never going to be able to live in Knightsbridge, so what's the point in living anywhere?
But Christo, they go onto social media, they go onto their Instagram, and they see people with Ferraris and Lamborghinis, and they want it now, but they don't understand the journey to get there. Unfortunately, some of the people they look at on these social media platforms were born into wealth.
Yeah.
They weren't. You and I weren't. It wasn't that easy for us.
I absolutely agree with that, and I've argued with people on social media saying, well, you can buy a flat in London for and again, this might seem like an absolute fortune to people out of London, but for £275,000, you can buy a one-bedroom ex-local flat in London as your first... No, you can't. Well, you can. You've got to look for it.
Yes, right.
And it's going to be in an area which might be quite nice, but the flats themselves might not be. But
and
you're
it's
not
an extra 10 minutes to work, and you've got to walk 5 minutes to the tube station.
Or looking somewhere like Croydon, looking somewhere on the outer boroughs of London where you might have to commute in a little bit.
But suck it up for now.
Because it's going to get you on that step.
You'll get equity.
Then
you'll discharge a mortgage.
But they say, well, no, it's not. Why should I have to live out there?
That's what they say. I need to live as well. I have to have a life. I have to go on the holidays that I see other people going on my Instagram feed.
And that could have been, as with yours, well, why do I have to live in a really horrible road in Leeds? Well, because you do.
But the irony of it is, Christo, you and I didn't look into Instagram and see other people's lives. So I never strive for travel in business class. I never strive to have long-haul flights or be able to shop on New Bond Street. But I don't know, that work mentality got me there quite accidentally.
But that's because as well our values, and I feel a bit for younger people now, is that our values are a bit skewed, and the currency of value, I mean personal value, is a lot wrapped up in Instagram and all of that. That's and wanting everything now. I mean, are we talking sense here? And is there just this much wider societal problem that maybe has skewed parents but also other people's priorities in general? Or are we being too kind to some of the people that we're talking about here? 0344 499 1000. And how do we solve the problem in a way that makes sure that children just aren't hungry? That's all I care about, is that children aren't hungry. Let's get to some of your calls coming up on this, plus a few more stories from the newspapers, all here live on Talk TV. Paul Britton, leading criminal defence lawyer. Now, something that Renee said really annoyed you earlier. Love you, Renee. But it was about the cigarettes.
Oh, it did. Yes. So I looked. I don't smoke. I've never smoked. My dad smoked. A packet of 20 cigarettes is £12.
Isn't it more than that now?
No, I had a look. I mean, I think I saw Rothman Royals or something, which are probably quite cheap.
You strike me as a Rothman Royal kind of guy.
Well, my dad was a Rothman who'd just buy cigarettes that were as cheap as possible. But I don't know how much 20 Benson and Hedges are. But the guest on the show, he didn't go as far as I said, but parents are apparently saying that their cigarettes are their one joy in life. And for me, I just found that comment absolutely disgusting, particularly as they have children, and surely their children should be their joy in life.
£14.10 for 20 Marlborough Gold.
It's unbelievable. And how many are they smoking a day? So what do we say, 10 a day? And that's not a lot.
But the point that she was making...
That money they could spend to have quality time with their children, who should be their primary joy in life. I know if I had children, they'd be mine.
I think that the point she was making was she actually said it's a study that she was referring
That's
to
right.
on that. And I did...
So their one joy in life, to have a cigarette,
but that is actually,
to inhale smoke.
That's a sociological...
And fill their lungs.
No, I'll tell you why it's their joy in life. It's not the smoke. The sociological study that she was referring to, and I studied this at the time, was that it's not necessarily about the smoke itself. It's about people in poverty. I'm not excusing it. I'm just trying to explain it. Feeling like it's the only thing they have for themselves. It's something that they do for them. It's the one joy that they have that is about them and no one else. Now, I agree, that doesn't make it right.
Find something else. Go for a walk. And sit under the tree.
You're absolutely right.
Read a book.
My mum used to smoke and my dad hated it, and then she started having the occasional one, and she hasn't smoked for like over 30 years, probably longer, 40 years. But my dad, again, never smoked, and my dad, whenever he could smell cigarette smoke on me when I used to be younger, he'd be furious, not just because of the health, but because of the money. Because, again, that's the Greek businessman in him that you just don't... He just could never get his head around giving away all that money for no reason. Same as when I was lucky enough to want to buy my house when I was younger. I remember being 19 years old and I'd just left uni, and I was there staying at uni for another year, staying in the city for another year, and going through all the rental pages and feeling that pit in my stomach, thinking, I'm going to have to hand this money to someone else. I should buy somewhere. I've got to try and buy somewhere.
Don't rent,
because it's
throwing the money away.
It's that sort of business mentality. But I think that if you are someone who feels you've got nothing for yourself, and also if you are not lucky enough to have had the example we've had, perhaps you just don't think like that, and you don't know any better. Is that too liberal?
Better.
Is that too liberal?
I mean, no, I think it is. Yeah, the problem is we're both not smokers. We need a smoker in here to even it out. Otherwise, we just become like an echo chamber. But
you could have that as well as someone who is.
But I'd love to hear it from the horse's mouth. And
but that you could apply that probably the same principle as the smoking to someone who basically whose children are in poverty, but they are having 2 glasses of wine a night.
Don't these things start much earlier on with education?
Yes.
So
absolutely.
If the role models of our fathers have gone, yours and mine, what are schools doing to plug that gap?
I think that's a very fair point.
Who is passing on these values?
Let me bring in a couple of tweets and texts, and then we'll get a couple of calls on air. Barry says, it's not the state's responsibility to feed people's children. I don't buy a car and expect a government to pay for the petrol. Ridiculous. Thank you. Another one here this morning regarding child-free meals. Well, I think you mean free meals for children, not child-free. We're not putting our children in a meal today. Child benefit should be stopped. Those already receiving it continues, but say from Jan 25, no more benefit. This way, more money can be ploughed back into nursery care, enabling parents to work. I mean, I think 2 children with child benefit, maybe even 3, I'm not against that, but I think beyond that, anyone whose decision to have children is based on what the state can give you, that is so screwed up as far as I'm concerned, because what the state giveth, the state can take away. So you should never base your financial circumstances on that. Rich in Cheltenham, agree with you mostly this morning, but like me, you probably bought your first property for 3 or 4 times your salary. My children can't find a property anywhere for less than 8 times their salary. Rich, unfortunately, your children are going to have to move away from you.
And that's what people don't want to face.
Yeah.
And I say that to people, and they say, but I need to be near my family. And I say, well, how far is it? Oh, it's a 45-minute drive.
Yeah, I agree.
mean, go and live in the States. You know, you'll travel 5 hours to see mum and
I lived
dad.
3 hours away from my family because you just wouldn't have to do.
It's not far. An hour's drive is not far.
I'll start with Jackie in Manchester, who always likes to talk a bit of common sense. Morning to you, Jackie.
Good morning, Christo. I'm torn on this issue. I think there's a moral argument, but I do think there's a personal responsibility argument. Now, I was a single mum for 2 young children. I worked as a nurse. I struggled for money, so I worked extra nights. I had somebody to mind the children at night, and I would have to stay up in the day after working 12-hour shifts, and that's what I did. If I didn't have enough money, my children would be fed, and I would go without meals. I was also a single parent that smoked, and that was the only thing. I would go without food. I would go without clothes. I would make sure my children were clothed. And that was the only thing, as you said before, that I had for me. Because my responsibilities were for the children. And I worked extra shifts so that I could pay for everything for the kids, but I could afford my cigarettes. That was the only treat that I had. Now, morally, I think that every kid should be fed. But as far as responsibility is concerned, what bothers me is that if the state steps in, it absolves the parents of this personal responsibility.
Yeah. I think that's a really fair point. And, you know, again, on paper, I want a society where anyone who has a child says, well, of course it's my responsibility. How could my children ever go to school without being fed? But something's going wrong. Something isn't happening that is making all that happen and making those children get fed. And the problem that we have is that the children who are going hungry are the ones suffering. And I don't want children going hungry either, just to make a point to the parents. So it's a really, really tricky one. And I think that it's got to start with education. But Jackie, I just want to bring Paul in because, Paul, I just want you to reflect on Jackie about the cigarettes.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that Jackie's phoned in because I just said that we need to be more balanced here because Christo and I don't smoke. But Jackie, out of interest, how many did you smoke a day?
About 10.
Okay, so I mean, today's you'll be smoking 6-7 pounds a day. Now, if it came down to it, and you had to choose between your 10 cigarettes and feeding your children, what would have been your priority?
Feeding my children.
Yeah.
But you still, but again, that 10 cigarettes equivalent today would probably be, what would that be?
6-7 quid a day.
7 quid a day, yeah. So that's nearly 50 quid a week, which is, you know, your children's packed lunches every day.
Yeah. 250 pounds a month.
But I worked the extra shifts.
That's right.
So that I had something for me and everything for the kids. So I took on extra work
But Jackie, what do you think about people today that want a 4-day working week, so they actually want to work less?
Well, I think it's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And I think that there's been a massive societal shift in my lifetime. I'm 57. And what I've seen is that we've gone from personal responsibility and aspiration to a sense of entitlement that we should have this.
That's right.
We should have that. And
rights upon rights.
Yeah, and children are getting a raw deal. As we saw through COVID, the things that were done to children, where was the outcry? And we're not putting, as a society, children first, and I find that really sad.
But Jackie, how are you going to undo it?
Well, what I would do is, I would give the kids the free school meals, but what I would do is the local authority to bill the parents. So you don't absolve the parents of their responsibility. If they cannot pay that bill, then they are means tested, and that's a different kettle of fish.
My worry about that, and I get the principle of you then needing to pay something every day and that making the parents realise the value of that meal. But my worry is that any financial benefit that you get from those parents paying, you would lose by having to administer that and means testing them and the cost of that. But Jackie, it sounds like we're sort of on the same page. Thank you for that. Do a couple of texts, and then coming up after the break, we'll still do a couple of more minutes on this, then we'll move on to a couple of the other stories that are around today. OK, smoking is OK, says Bob. Stop trying to take the last control from me. I don't drink, I don't take other drugs, I don't even drink coffee. So leave me off my smoking. You're stressing me this morning. Again, Bob, I get where you're coming from, Bob. That's it. That's all you have for you. And I think that's the mentality we're dealing with when it comes to that. OK, Krista, everyone wants free school meals, but everyone's got the latest gadgets, the phones. Isn't food more important, says Wayne. Thank you. Sally makes quite a good point regarding Jackie, whom we love, Jackie, but I think this is a fair point. I'd rather spend more time at home with the children rather than working extra shifts to pay for cigarettes, says Sally. Or, again, we didn't really have time to explore this with Jackie, but again, if I was someone going out doing extra shifts and getting that 50 quid that would have paid for my cigarettes, my mentality would have been, but what else could I buy for the children with that?
But also those extra shifts and working hard is a good role model to pass on to the children.
True, there is a value to that too.
There is a value to that.
Yeah, that's
Seeing
a
mum
very
and dad
good point.
working to provide for the family.
That's a very, very good point. Another one here as well. Maybe the state should stop taxing cigarettes so children get fed. Thank you for that. Don't we already, says Martin, feed people's children by providing child benefit? As a single man, I'm tired of subsidising other people's life choices. Martin, I think that's a really good point as well, by the way, that if you are someone who is single or who isn't married, right, there is so much discourse around education and all of these things and child benefit and free school meals and free childcare and all the things. And OK, great, you'll get a benefit from them when you're older, and there are people who are paying tax who are younger that are paying for your retirement, and I get that, but you put a hell of a lot in the system that you probably during your younger years don't get a lot out of. So I understand your frustration on that one. The constant blanket attack on parents is getting more frustrating, especially because people who normally comment on parenting never have children themselves. You do what you need to do to feed your children, even if it means you don't eat. Thank you for that. Wayne, give all the starving children packed lunches. I grew up on them, says Wayne. Another one here as well. Surely, if you set the tax threshold at, say, £20,000, then the welfare bill would come down. What's the point in someone earning a low salary giving the government tax only for it to be given back to them in social security? Absolutely agree with that. And also, remember, we have the situation with tax credits as well, which almost became an excuse for low wages, but in actual fact it's the responsibility on employers to pay fair wages, not for the state to pick up the slack of low wages by giving it back either in a tax credit or some other kind of benefit. So that's where the system, I think, is slightly skewed as well, and for years we did have that. OK, when we come back, we'll leave the story. We'll return to it because you do want to call about this quite a lot. But we've got a few stories that have caught your eye this morning, including... Oh, there's a really good story about a prisoner. Talking about the state trying to claw back money. This story is unbelievable that Paul has got about someone who spent 17 years in jail for a crime they didn't commit, and then what the state has asked them for since they've been released. You will not believe it, and we will reveal more when we return right here live on Talk TV Papers. We're going to leave the chat about the child benefit and feeding children and school meals for just a moment, because you have a story this morning, and I just can't quite get my head around it, and it's about a wrongly jailed prisoner, Paul.
Yes, this guy was found guilty of rape in 2003 and was sentenced to 17 years. He's been fighting to get out ever since.
So he didn't commit this crime?
He said he didn't commit it consistently all the way through. He trusted the police to investigate at the time and to almost be a gatekeeper to protect him. That didn't happen. That tends not to happen, and he was wrongly convicted, and he's been locked up for 17 years. He's come out, Court of Appeal have overturned it, and the state have asked him as part of his compensation, so he'll now be entitled to some sort of compensation for having his life taken away for 17 years. And they've said out of that compensation, we want you to pay back your bed and board for being in jail.
I mean, that is absolutely unbelievable.
Unthinkable that the system has let him down.
But see, the way I see it, there are things in life in which you have, as a member of society, contracts with the state.
Yeah.
And the state did not fulfil its contract by providing justice. The state failed miserably in its contract with him, and so they're trying. I mean, why are they just trying to claw back some money?
We could call it like a mutual trust and confidence between you and the state. And yeah, he's been. I have to say, this isn't. I mean, this is news to you, but this quite often happens. I've participated in cases where I feel that the outcome has been unjust. I've got an appeal on the go at the moment. I'm defending a client against a very serious allegation, which I'm wholeheartedly convinced that she didn't do, and she's in jail and she shouldn't be there. So these things. And
so, do you expect, as part of that then if you are successful, there will be an attempt by the state to say, fine, we should give you some compensation, but actually we're taking some money off the bill because she did get some electricity, she got a bed, she didn't have housing expenses.
When they work in jail, they get between £2 and £4 a day.
Okay.
That very famous Benj, the footballer that's just been acquitted of all 6 accounts of rape, he was earning £6 a day doing work in prison. I mean, we talk about minimum wage, but that's what they get. And he went from £100,000 a week to £4 a day.
And then what do? They want to take money out of that £6 a day towards the bed and board?
Well, you earned your £6, but you contributed to the prison, so you cleaned, you kept the place, all that sort of stuff. But they're saying the costs that the state have paid in housing you and feeding you and clothing you whilst you've been in jail, we want it back.
But does this happen? Jane has made a very good point here, saying you charge an innocent man bed and board, but why don't you charge the people who are guilty and released?
Yeah, well, I guess that's why when the guilty people work in prison, so they clean and they do things like that, then they get paid £2 to £4 a day. The difference between that two is paying for their keep, so the prison are saving money.
But this guy would have done that.
That's right, yeah.
So again, I don't understand the logic.
I mean, he has a good case, particularly for like his losses. What could he have earned in those 17 years? What was his career? These are kind of the heads of claims that would be looking at for him to see what his compensation package is. Now, if it was a doctor or a solicitor on a large salary,
well, you guys, I mean, you
probably earn more than me, Christo, so be careful.
Let's not go down that road.
So yeah, I mean, when you work it out, it does work out a lot of money. But have you been in a jail?
I've never been in a jail.
Right, listen, they are. People talk about them being, good in this country. You don't want to be in jail.
Why?
It's just awful. It's doom and gloom. It's black and white. It's cold. It's sterile. No one there is joyful. No one is happy. You can't go out.
There are lots of people that listen to this. Well, I know you can't go out. You're in jail.
Yeah. But I mean, even when you go out of the prison, it's you've got these huge fences.
But a lot of people would listen to this and say, "Well, good. That's exactly what it should be."
But not good if you're innocent.
Well, yeah, not good if you're innocent.
No.
Yeah, but isn't that exactly what jail is?
But if you lose 17 years of your life to that, what it makes me appreciate is everything that I have in life. If I go and get a haircut, I'm grateful that I can sit in that chair and pay someone £20 to cut my hair and just be able to go to the barbers when I want to go to the barbers and pick a barber. That kind of civil liberty that I have, that freedom that I have as a criminal defence solicitor, I can't tell you how much I value it.
I mean, I think prison should be hard, but where I think we let people down when it comes to prison, and I've never been in a prison, so
I'll take you next time, Christo.
Can't wait. But no, what I don't think we do enough here is that I don't think we rehabilitate enough. I think it should be tough, but I think we don't do enough to actually prepare people so that they can become valued members of society when they leave prison. Is that fair or not?
I think rehabilitation is important. Like, just going back to the last thing we're talking about, parents and children, it's all about education, isn't it? So if we are locking people up, what we should be putting a lot of money into or emphasis is that when they come out...
I know you're passionate. Stop banging the table.
When they come out, we should We should make sure that they have the skills to contribute to society.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you should learn something while you're in there. You get the tough stuff.
Graduate.
But you learn something and you have a glimmer of hope by doing that, that actually, OK, this is terrible, this is awful, I hate being here, all of the restrictions that you've spoken about. But actually, if I work hard at this one thing I'm given, there is actually a chance that when I leave here, I've got something to aim for and I might have a nice life when I leave here and actually become a valued member,
a valuable member
of society.
That target.
Dan from Kent, just very quickly before we move on to eco people. Paul talking common sense, but sometimes people are just born bad? ? Is anyone born bad? Answer it in 10 seconds.
So it comes into my head that, human beings haven't got to the top of the food chain by being good, right? So it's in all of us to be bad, but what we do have that everything else doesn't have is intelligence. So we should be able to stop and reflect on I believe that most people are narcissistic, but they're on a scale. And what you can do is you can stop yourself. It's quite easy to blame someone else when something happens, but you've got to say, hang on, no, that was my fault. And that's where our intelligence kicks in, and all of this process.
It goes back exactly to where we started.
So we're all born bad to survive. But now we're intelligent, we don't need that.
But you learn that as well. You learn that by example, and you learn that from parents.
Well, there's some nurture and there's some nature, and it's, you see people being bad and you start maybe being a little bit bad yourself.
But now we say about this stuff about prisons and all of this sort of thing, but many people will be listening to this saying, throw away the eco-loons and throw away the key. And that is, in the Mail today, eco-clowns launch a plot to paralyse London with 3 weeks of mayhem.
Outrageous.
Even more. Do they not think that we've got the point when it comes to this? It's page 5 of the Mail today.
And they need to be punished. They need to be punished more severely. Processed at the very first protest that they do, and they cause some civil unrest, some public order offences, they should be processed straight away. If it's a second offence, then they should be looking at serving time, maybe a suspended sentence, because that threat of actually going in. The beauty of a suspended sentence, they might get 2 years as a sentence, but 12 months will be suspended. So if they recommit an offence in those 12 months, then they go in for the rest of the time, the 2 years. So if they're on a suspended for 12 months, they commit an offence, they go in, they do another year in prison.
Is it counterproductive? Because this stuff makes me just go, I don't care anymore about eco stuff. It really has made me go the other way.
Christo, it's okay. So... Yeah, it's okay if it's not affected. Do you mean the protests? Or?
I mean all of it. Again, I'm not going to go down a ULEZ route because we did enough.
But if your loved one was in an ambulance on the M25 trying to get to a specialist hospital,
I get it. Absolutely.
And this lot had blocked the motorway and your loved one died...
Because I've started to get this mentality now.
They have blood on their hands.
Yeah,
an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind.
But I've started to get this mentality now where, again, I was doing my bins yesterday. It's very interesting. And... But I think, oh, God, I shoved that can in the bin. I don't care. I put the can in the bin. I don't care. Screw them. I've started to have a screw them mentality because...
But this is what they need to hear, because they are turning people against not only them, but they're...
And it's petty.
They're extreme cause. They are extremists.
And I've started doing this sort of thing where I'm just like, well, OK, I probably shouldn't drive, but I'm going to because they want me not to. Yeah. So I'm going to. Yeah. And I know that it's so petty and it's childish and it's ridiculous.
And I could buy an electric car, but do you know what?
No.
I like that 5-litre
V8. A year ago, I bought a car with a bigger engine than my last one. Yeah. Listen, good to talk to you. Good to have you here. It's Paul Britton, leading criminal defence lawyer. You must come back. I will, yeah. Maybe. And coming up in the next hour, we've got our Right Royal Roundup, we've got our Head-to-Head, our Sunday Showdown, and lots more. This is Talk TV.